Hey everyone, super excited to have you here for the Wasder Fireside chat about the future of gaming, which is of course covering a lot of my absolute favorite topics. We got blockchain, NFTs, games, technology, the future. I mean, it's going to be a really cool night. We have some fantastic panelists. We have some fantastic topics, and I'll go through them. Just wanted to mention real quick that there are more than 3 billion gamers in the world. Yeah, you hear that right, 3 billion. And the gaming industry, as you may or may not know, is bigger than the music industry and the movie industry combined. We have esports events filling arenas all over the world with more people watching them than Super Bowl. Pretty crazy how it's grown, right? I remember being a little tiny kid playing my Nintendo and my Game Boy to now this, where we're talking about metaverses, we're talking about open worlds, we're talking about complex circular economies built on new technologies where we see major paradigm shifts in ownership, in participation, in interaction, and in experiences. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the topics and send some of the speakers as we jump into those topics. So tonight, the new cool. That's topic number one. How do you attract a new generation of gamers and what makes them happy? Topic number two, what are the biggest opportunities gaming companies have with brand engagement and digital media buying? Number three, how to get everyone today to know about your game and become a dedicated player. Providing solutions with discovery and conversations and conversions, in a very saturated landscape. Then we have topic number four, where we go into the future of social interaction in the digital gaming space and how does it look like? And then the creative collaboration between the social platform and the metaverses and games. The last topic, I think, will spark a lot of good conversations. We've seen a lot of attempts in the industry lately, and we'll dig into this, but the topic is removing the misconception that NFTs are bad. So let's talk about how blockchain and NFTs actually make gaming better. And our speakers there. The first topic, again, is that gaming is the new cool. So let's see, how can we attract a new generation of gamers and what makes them happy? On the panel with me today, we have Thomas Gronnevik, who is, of course, the Wasder CEO. He's born and raised in Norway, and he has over 15 years of experience in the industry and with building companies across a variety of sectors. And he's aligned the company around 3 core strategic pillars, which is driving digital transformation, putting users first, and operating as one team. He's also an avid gamer himself who can be seen playing Dota in his spare time and is, just like me, looking forward to the new ashes of creation. He has a huge passion for serving the community and which helps him drive him every single day. We also have Markus Schramm, who is the creative director of Wasder. And he is a creative who, for the last 10 years or so, has been helping some of the largest companies in the world. We're talking Reebok, Carlsberg Group, Mojang, Intersport, to identify the next generation of consumers and define how to communicate with them, while also ensuring an optimal product market fit. Markus joined Wasder because he wanted to be a part of transforming and redefining gamers' ecosystems in the best experience possible. And last but absolutely not least, we have Sophie from Rise and Play. She's a creative lead with over 13 years of experience in the mobile gaming industry, currently leading a small creative studio with Voodoo in Berlin. And additionally, she's the founder of Rise and Play, which is a platform on leadership practices advocating for human-centric approach to game development and teams. Welcome, everyone. So glad to have you on here.
Thank you so much.
So gaming being the new cool in the world. We've gone from, we actually, right before this panel started, had a little conversation about the stigma of a gamer 20 years ago versus the stigma today. So let's talk about that stigma that initially started and how gaming became the new cool, because that kind of leads into how we attract that new generation of gamers and what makes them happy. Who would like to get a little start on that? Thomas.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for doing this and all the other people here who's both listening and that I get the amazing opportunity to talk to. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the stigma started, but I think that, I mean, obviously being 30 plus, 30 old, and whatever phrase I want to use here, but as a young man, I mean, one of those things when you met someone, you never really wanted to be a gamer. I think it was always a lot of stigma, as in, you know, you're a nerd, you're a geek, you sit in the basement, you socially awkward, all of those things. It kind of was attached to that back then. I think for me, it's always been one of those escapes into really, really cool exploration of worlds and gaming and the way that you could have fun in a good way. For me, it's always been super social. So I think there's been a misconception for many, many years about what a gamer is. However, I still think the label, as I mentioned before this too, I still think the label kind of exists on the word gamer itself. I think we've gotten to a point where the new generation, the people that are younger than me, that is the future of our world, I think they accept the behavior. We all do it now. As you mentioned, there are 3 billion of us, but the word still has some sentiments attached to it in many ways. That's my immediate thought process. But luckily we have people like, again, I mean, Markus, who helps us define what we are, who's really pointed out what the new generation look like in my head on one side. And then obviously we have Sophie, who's, if there's anyone who knows how to talk to this audience, who's done really, really well. So I'm looking forward to learning here.
Sophie, what are your thoughts on this, on both the stigma that we just talked about, but also talking to the new generation of gamers? What has changed the last 10, 15 years?
So I think here we have to come back really to the origins of digital games and why there's this stigma. I mean, so Thomas was mentioning like 30 years ago, like if we look back, it was mostly PC and console game, and it was quite of a niche, actually, type of entertainment. First of all, it was not so cheap, actually, to acquire a console back in the day or a PC, so it was not that accessible for everyone. And so the ones who could afford it or would go really for it, then was a certain category of people, and that's how, you know, this term of gamers was born, and this image, and of course a lot of men, more than we would see like what we see these days, gamers. So times have changed, like now 15, 20 years forward, where games don't only exist through a device like console, PC that you need to buy specifically for it, but it's models as well with like free to play, where it's accessible for everyone. So on the web, there were the Facebook social games as well. So it completely opened the accessibility of games, because you didn't have to have this barrier entry where you have to buy this device. I think it has completely opened it in social networks and welcome a new generation. So it was 10 years ago, I think, with social network games, Farmville on Facebook, that where we could see a different type of players. And then mobile, and with a business model of free to play. So I think this has opened a lot as well of a definition of what we call gamers. And maybe a better word, I would say these days when we talk about gamers, at least in our language, and I represent as well here Voodoo as a company making hyper casual games, where I think we count like 2 billion of downloads, more than 2 billion. So it's huge. Wow. Across all our games. So it's a third of the planet, if you think about it. And with this own definition of gamers, I wouldn't say it's gamers who have downloaded our games, but it's players, or we can say in a broader term, users. But we say more players. I think it's a more softer label, word to call people who play games. And to a bigger extent, I think, anyway, as I see things evolving, when I look at also the games that are on social network, like Snapchat games, like small games, hyper casual games, games that don't even look like games. Like I see a lot of lifestyle games where, for example, games like COVID fashion, interior design games, where they are almost interior design simulators, and it's an audience who don't consider themselves as gamers. it's basically anyone who would play a game, and these days it's from any device if you have a mobile, or I saw as well recently on Netflix releasing their games as well, publishing. You watch TV and you play a game, it's there, in front of you everywhere. And if you connect it with others. So to answer the question as well of new generation of gamers, for me, it's more just spread to anyone playing games. And maybe we wouldn't call that gamers anymore. As I was mentioning before, it's like talking about watchers or listeners. You have just users of a form of entertainment that are games, basically.
Right, exactly. So it's a new form of entertainment. I think it's interesting how we see a lot of emerging economies really popping up on the gaming map, for example, because mobile devices are so accessible, right? Like you said, they still maybe can't afford buying PCs or consoles, but mobile phones are for free, pretty much. And I want to dig more into that as well in attracting those new markets and those new games. But Markus, would love to hear your kind of creative input on the approach that has been, but you've also built a very interesting growth kind of map for Wasder, of course, but you've been involved in the game industry for a long time through different clients and brands. How do you see your journey has kind of evolved from speaking to gamers before and the new generation of gamers that you're now speaking to?
Yeah, I think what Sophie mentioned, I can really relate to that, coming from the marketing industry. And I think the marketing industry or marketeers tend to, and I did that a couple of years ago as well, go into a trap and look, as both Thomas and Sophie touched on, we look at we should target gamers, and we look at a subcultural small group instead of looking at this bigger group, which is basically everyone. And I think the big change there is probably like the later millennials and early and Gen Zers, because when you look at those, Thomas mentioned when he grew up how the landscape was, and I think it's a big cultural change. And I think that is the really, I think that is where we have a really big impact and a really big difference, because when I grew up, it was exactly as Thomas mentioned, but now it's culturally rooted, and as Sophie said, it's just like watching TV and watching whatever. So it's part of any subculture, and you can also see, if you look at, still a lot of marketeers are doing this wrong. They're looking at now we should target gamers, and they look at certain small subculture, which is some sort of stereotypical gamer. And I think there's where a lot of people do wrong. But if you look at some of the brands that is brands to this audience, the younger generation, they are so also the brands that is in the forefront. Take, for example, North Face and Gucci Pokemon Go collaboration, or right now we have COS and Fortnite. Balenciaga made a Fortnite collaboration. Several big brands went into Roblox last year and the years before that. I think those are the brands and the marketers that have understood how it works, because I think it's exactly what Sophie says. It's no longer gamers. They are gamers, but they are players, because gamers, for a lot of people, describe a subcultural person, but everyone play games today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you guys have been touching on something really important here. Again, Sophie, as you mentioned, they're users. They're not gamers per se, as it could be a subcultural kind of thing. Also, Markus, when you were talking about the approach on how to talk to them and the differences in this. So my question, I guess, for you guys is, with all the new stuff that's coming, right? We're seeing an explosion in gaming. A lot of people have predicted that 2022 is going to be one of the most explosive years in gaming we've ever seen, because of the Metaverses, the big AAA games that are coming out, the open worlds, etc. Do you think we'll still see a participation from the younger, new generation of gamers in those very new technologies? or will we have a clear kind of division on casual games that are very easy and free to play versus the huge games and, again, metaverses or universes, whatever you want to call it, that require some deeper attention? Sophie.
Yeah, I was also thinking about that. I don't know the answer for sure, but I can for now more share my view or my understanding about it. So also being close to some companies that are building metaverse at the moment, universe, and also working, like even developing games on Roblox and understanding a bit further this audience. For sure, I think here there's definitely an established audience that play games. When I look at what we call casual games and audience, especially given my background, I've worked on many puzzle games, simulation games, and the audience here is really, I don't know, not mostly female, but more female and 35, 40 plus. And what we see with this casual audience, that is a huge market, and they, these players, they are spending in in-app purchase in great quality products on mobile. They are not going for innovations and crazy changes or complex worlds and games, but they are going more for what's predictable. It's like an expansion of what they already is. So we see a familiarity, and I have tried many things as well. When many companies try to introduce mid-core features to this casual audience, it really needs to happen step by step. So I think there's for sure what we call casual audience, as we know, very established, comfortable with what's familiar, and it keeps growing as they become more and more what we could call gamers, casual gamers, because they play a lot, spend a lot, and it's part of entertainment for them that is really important, as much as, I don't know, investing in movies or outside activities, you know. So there's that part, and I see this younger generation that are very open for new technologies, like early adopters, being everywhere, being very connected, and incorporating all the forms of media in one, the same product. So when we think of metaverse, it's like you are connected to others. You can develop a character or second personality avatar in this world, and this avatar, your digital representation, can translate in other forms, in other form of media, whether it's music, or how you connect with others, or whatever you like to follow the artist can be followed in some way in this metaverse. So it makes a lot of sense for this younger generation that is first more proficient with technology and what's happening, and all the social network, like TikTok generation, Snapchat, which to be honest, I don't really fully understand. I can just observe that it is happening, but I cannot make a logical sense of it. That's also where I see that I'm not this audience, but I can see for sure more openness. And when we think of also this new era of games with blockchain, crypto, NFTs, is to be seen if this younger audience will completely adopt it. But we see that also with influencers. When I see like the influencers that are going with NFTs, it's usually younger people. They just experiment a lot. They put it on the web and they see what sticks, you know. And I could imagine that as well, where they approach these new platforms of metaverse or blockchain games to either make a business. So a lot of entrepreneurs as well, young gamer entrepreneurs, want to make a business out of it. Yeah. And we'll see other form of, applications of it as this younger generation try ideas. So I'm very fascinated, surprised, or shocked most of the time of what's happening there. But it's definitely younger generation that are more tech savvy with all the things I mentioned than the already what we call older audience of games, like casual audience, like playing king games, like puzzle games, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
I think. Can I cut in here, Sami?
Sure. Go ahead.
I think Sophie touches on things that are super, super crucial. I think one of the key things is that audiences do what they already kind of have what they're comfortable with. And I think especially one of the key things there is understanding what the value is that you bring me whenever I try it, like whenever I do something new. And I think one of the key things when it comes to for example, the young audiences is that they're the audience that we will keep in social platforms, in games, and adopting new technologies, if they understand what it gives them. If they understand, why is this good for me? Why is this fun for me? What experience do I get out of this that I think is enjoyable, that I think is fun? And that means you have to communicate to them in a way that relates to them and that they understand. I think Metaverses, for example, I still think is really tricky for a lot of normal consumers to understand, what does that actually mean? What does that mean for me? What does it give me? What is the experience? Because the technology is less important to them unless they understand the why and the things that are fun for them. I think one of the reasons why I think, for example, that Metaverses is so exciting and so incredibly cool is because, and I've said this before, like my favorite author of all time is Anne Rice. She wrote the Vampire Chronicles. I think yes, I'm old school. I like vampire stuff. But she wrote that, and she tells this amazing story that if I had seen that in games, I don't think I would have ever dropped that game. What a lot of Metaverses do is they allow the communities and the individuals and the storytellers to be able to create and tell that story, utilizing gaming and technology to do so and participate in creation. I think it can be a great onboarding tool for all these people who, men, women, older generation, younger generation, who can participate and give us so much cool experiences. But we need to first and foremost tell them, why is this good for you? What is this? We need to make them understand. I think Markus probably can add much more than me on this, but how you talk to this audience, what they care about, matters. So I think maybe Markus is the best person to kind of follow up on that, especially for the younger generation, because they're even more so in tune with this than I am.
Yeah, and I think, Markus, to wrap up, we got about 2 more minutes, and I really want to finish up with that question, because I know we have a lot of industry people watching this. We have a lot of veterans from big industries, from big game publishers. We have a couple of new game publishers. We have game developers. We have blockchain people. We have crypto people. We have press people. We have all kinds of stuff. But so the real question is, how do you attract the new gamers or the new users, as we wanted to call them, right? Because that's what everybody is either struggling with or going to be struggling with. What is if you can summarize in a quick, like 30-second answer I want to hear from all of you guys. What is the main thing companies, new or old, should think about when attracting new users on their games? Markus, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think it's about realizing the things Sophie touched on. It's not about them being gamers or tapping into subculture. It's about tapping into modern pop culture overall, and understand that and doing that the right way. I mean, some of those brands I mentioned, they're on the path there, just started, and I think that's exactly how you get there. You go through pop culture and you do it in a way where it feels fresh and create something new and something different than others. Kind of what Sophie mentioned as well with like, I'm also a lot older than this generation, so I can just look at them. I'm not like them, so I have to like observe. And I think exactly what Sophie said.
Embracing culture more, embracing culture more, and pop culture specifically. So, Thomas, what's your 30-second?
I think for me, I might be a little cynical on this one, but I think for me, it's using understandable language. I think, obviously, having a huge sales background, I think making them understand the benefits for them, what's in it for them, why it makes it fun for them, what they can get out of it. I think that is the first thing to making them buy in. And I think the new generation, both, regardless of age, require a lot more from any game or service in terms of the experience they get now than they used to. I think if you look at the games I used to play when I was a kid, obviously most of the games coming out now just provides me with so much more and gives me so much more value. I think for me, I think that would be the two main things: understanding what people say and why it's good, and also the experience you get.
Awesome. Sophie, you got 30 seconds sharp.
So I would double down here on understanding the audience. I think this is the most tricky part, and especially understanding that we are not the audience anymore. And I think that has been the history of when we are always developing games. We are not anymore the audience. So I would hire actually young influencer, digital marketers that are very active in the space to be the one actually to connect, make the link with the ones that are actually making the product. With the audience and what's happening, to understand a bit deeper, or talk a lot with the audience. But I think it's good to have internally people who are just very young, who are already maybe active and have their own business there, to be as well developing these ideas along with more traditional game developers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Markus, Thomas, Sophie, really enjoyed this chat. We're going to take a 30-second break and move over to the next topic. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Wasder Fireside Chat after a little short break here. We just finished up the first topic. You can always watch it afterwards, of course. The gaming is the new cool, and we talked about how do we attract a new generation of gamers and what makes them happy. Now this is the second topic that we're going to be discussing this evening, and the topic is, what are the biggest opportunities gaming companies have with brand engagement and digital media buying? So this is going to be a very interesting conversation. Of course, we've already introduced Thomas Gronnevik, the CEO of Wasder, and Sophie Vo, who's of course coming from the Voodoo and Rise and Play for us. We have two new speakers with us today. And of course, I'd like to introduce Jayne, which I just realized I've been mispronouncing this whole evening, of course. But I think, Jayne, you are the VP of Growth at Dapper Labs and have an extensive background from Gala Games, from EA, from DraftKings, from Reddit. Quite the great career there. And I know that you love NFTs and you discuss some very, very important topics on your Twitter profile. We talked about this before we started all this, actually. Talks about women in gaming, women in blockchain, mental health. very, very important topics, of course. So welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
And then, of course, we have Florian Ziegler, who is the Director of Systems and Economy here at Wasder. And he's been successfully making games for over 15 years across all platforms and genres, from core PC games at Sega and Ubisoft to casual and mid-core free-to-play titles at Activision, King, and EA. And he just loves designing games. After years advising game companies on how to build better games, he's now joined Wasder to bring the power of game design to the new generation of social networks. So, welcome everyone. It's a big topic. We're talking about the biggest opportunities that gaming companies have with brand engagement and digital media buying today in the current landscape. And we mentioned earlier that we see Metaverses coming out. We see big open world games coming out, but we also see these hyper casual games coming out that people are engaging with. So let's just start with some historical kind of review on the biggest opportunities today versus some of the opportunities that happened 5 or 10 years ago, because I think there's an important connection here, because we see a lot of gaming companies, big and small today, trying those old methods, and they just don't work anymore, right? So let's talk about that historical kind of bridge of what used to happen and what is happening today. And I think, Jayne, you would be a fantastic first kind of answering person on that one.
I'm happy to start off. Yeah. I started in mobile games before free-to-play model, before the App Store. And I was porting Symbian. I think I say this story all the time. Like, my dad made me port games because he was at a mobile games company before, when it was all feature phones. So that was what I did kind of when I first got into mobile games. And back in the day, there was no conversation about free-to-play games. You basically bought or you got an IP like a Hasbro or even a movie, and you created a game from that. And that was basically and you hope that people would buy that game, and that was it. That was your model. And I think in the blockchain and Web3 space, we're still at that point. We haven't figured out the right business model that's going to scale. We haven't figured out the version of free to play in a mobile game space when in a Web2 situation to this Web3 world. I think we're seeing some really interesting things with the play to earn models, land sales, NFTs, obviously, and collectibles, but we haven't found the business model that everyone is basically going to adopt in the next several years, and that's going to be the one that everyone uses for growth too. The free to play model then ignited this massive interest in growth, which is great because that's what I do. But it'll be interesting to see what this business model puts how you grow in this new business model. Maybe it's not the way that we've grown in Web 2, where you're trying to buy a bunch of mobile players that pay in games, and basically you're just stealing players from one company, one game into another. So I think it's just a really exciting time to witness.
You bring up a lot of great topics, and one of them I'm going to save for the last in the evening.
Okay, sorry.
But no, this is fantastic. But yeah, absolutely. From free to play to earn, or play and earn, and something that'll spark kind of a revolution or a paradigm shift. I think that's really important. Florian, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's been in mobile for quite a while, and you kind of become slave to the CPI at some point where it seems like your UA person is the most important person, and there aren't that many avenues. Obviously, you collaborate with brands, but really it's a very, very cutthroat kind of business that it has become. However, I think a lot of has changed, particularly when it comes to branding. So remember, working earlier on games, if you wanted something licensed, you need to really bag them, right? If you don't have a car license, you need to come and bag the manufacturer, and that has inverted now. So brands actually come to you now if you have a successful game and go like, "Hey, please, can we be in here?" Which is really changed in the same way that I know you guys have been talking about the changing nature of a games player. It has inverted as a business as well, because it's now the hugest media business we have. And that I think that also calls, as Jamie said, for a sort of a new approach now to how we engage brand user acquisition. And I think sort of the more metaversy approach that we're now seeing is games are the stepping stone to these virtual worlds that we will coexist in. You know, whether you buy land in it, as you just mentioned, or whether it's just some place that you get for free and you hang out. I think people have recognized, the brands have recognized that games are the gateway into these parallel universes, because the people who are playing a lot of games now will be the first adopters of all these newer technologies. So you see this obviously a lot in Fortnite, where they do big collaborations with artists and all that kind of stuff. But I think there's a new component to it where brands and sort of digital media that you try to get users with are actually experienced. So it's not just advertising that gets shown in your face all the time, and we hope that at some point you yield, you know, by the constant barrage. But it's actually something that you want to experience, which for me as a game designer is obviously great. Like, I feel more valuable than ever. Where, like, you know, I get asked from brands where they actually go in and kind of like, hey, we want to create an experience, we want to create value, an actual enjoyable experience surrounding our brand. It doesn't feel like we're constantly slamming ourselves in someone's face until they kind of finally press that button.
Yep, absolutely. Sophie, what do you feel about this?
Yeah, coming from a similar background as Florian, I wanted to continue more of a thoughts around brand presence, especially like here for hyper casual games, or games with the same business model, where it's a lot through ad views. So I think a lot of brands are visible through that, like when we have like interstitials or banners or videos you watch, and that's the type of presence you can see at the moment in games. However, when I think of metaverse in more future, like, so it's more an answer for future, I wonder, and this is more so for discussion here, if there's a place indeed to have more of a placements of brands in an interactive way, like you see in movies, for example, where you can recognize some brands, like you see a lot of Nike shoes or Adidas shoes in movies, and it's kind of normal. You wouldn't see that in a game these days, and because it's anyway the way you interact with. Rarely you will look at the shoes of a character, but when you are invested in a game that is your virtual representation, and it's where you hang out. I see actually opportunities at least to try these things. I think it's a lot of brands have dreamed to be present in games, but there was not really the application of it to make it meaningful. And I wonder, with the metaverse, will it make more sense where it matters to have, I don't know, the cool latest haute couture jacket on your avatar when you hang out, you go at your virtual party, you know, and probably for NFTs as well, where brands will take this opportunity to create probably a lot of digital rare goods where you are the only one to have this haute couture jacket to go in this virtual party. So I see a lot of opportunities in application, but I don't know if this will work. So this makes me just more, intrigued. Right. If this could evolve to that. But I could see this happening. I think it's more than the question of execution and application of it.
Absolutely. And I think, Thomas, of course, I'll bring you in for, it's not only a shameless plug, but coming from a background, of course, with, both leading communities with millions of players and then building a community with millions of users. How do you see the past of your experience, how brands once kind of came in and maybe wanted to do something as opposed to what you're building with Wasder and the future of gaming?
I think it's funny because I'm actually going to touch a little bit on what I'm going to start with where Jayne started. Because if you look at because I think it matters. I think gaming used to be one of those things where you were a games developer and like, I have this idea of a game that I really want to make, and this is really cool and I love this. So I'm going to make this, and I'm going to pray to God that my marketing team and social team has some sort of way of getting people to resonate with my idea. And obviously you could use big brands, you could use kind of known genres, or you could have your own ideas that you built it on. And obviously I sat on the social side and I sat on the community side. And it was always funny because we were the ugly ducklings of gaming, or the companies. We weren't the publishers. We didn't sit on building the tech, so we weren't those guys. We just sat on socials. But it was funny because we were the ones who heard what all the gamers talked about. We were the ones who saw the interactions. And I think that brings us to what Florian and Sophie touches on, which is, how do you interact with the consumers? And I think that's the keyword. The keyword for me is with. I think the future of user acquisition for me, and I think the future of, in many ways, of these worlds is how the brands and the companies can somehow create an interaction with the gamers that feels like there's a mutual benefit, where the gamers get something cool and you can have a conversation and an interaction between, rather than trying to hammer someone with an ad over and over and over, where they feel listened to, where they feel respected, where they feel heard. And obviously that's what we wanted to do with Wasder. I mean, we wanted to create what we call a social gaming microverse, which we haven't talked about in all yet publicly, but we become the partner to this, right? What I want to do is I want to create a platform where you have these hundreds of millions of players, but where we create an environment where the publishers, the game developers, can meet and have meaningful relations and engagements with the audience. Not talk to, but talk with. Give something cool in return. Let them engage with each other. Through tons of different mechanics and dimensions and solutions. Obviously, exploration in metaverses is one, rewards is one, items is one, NFTs is one. When I say items, NFTs is a tech choice for me. What I mean is I give you something cool and you give me something cool with which is your intention. So I think Jayne is spot on with how it used to be. I think Sophie is spot on with how it will become. And for me, Florian is the one who can create the mechanic, who can bridge those two in between, which is obviously why we hired Florian, and why I admire Florian so beyond anything you could possibly imagine. But I think it's understanding the past the way that, and the future the way that Jayne does, and because it's important to understand where it all came from, and where Sophie is she's right. I mean, I think that it is the interaction between brands being there and engaging with. But I think, again, Florian for me has been the one that opened my eyes to how the hell can you do it in a fun way, especially in can I say hell on stream? I can't.
Yeah, right? You can. Yeah,
okay. Yeah. But yeah, he's the one that does that for me in the ecosystem that we create, at least. So for me, it's obviously the social gaming microverse is the answer to the metaverses, but what do I know?
Well, you have quite the expertise, and I guess we'll see on the answer of that. We're talking about the future. We're talking about what's to come. So, I mean, if anybody of us had the real answer, I think we'd be I don't know what we would be, gazillionaires in a very short term. But speaking of, let's continue on the topic of brand engagement, right? Combined with digital media buying. I myself come from a digital media buying background, right? I've run millions of downloads for games through media buying, and I want to touch a little bit on what Florian said, for example, is that you become a slave to the CPI, right? And Sophie, you've seen this too, where it's like you have traditional campaigns running with banners and catchy CTAs and all that stuff, and then we have brand engagement, and we've talked about cross-platform cultural integration, etc. Do you guys think there will be an even kind of more seamless interaction between brand engagement and direct acquisition? If that question somehow makes sense, because what I'm talking about here is you could do acquisition back in the days and just run ads and do no brand engagement, and you'd have players. Or you could also do brand engagement, but if you combine the both, you kind of had something that most others didn't have. But now, with the metaverses and the Web3 and all those things that you talked about, Jayne, do you think that it's even more important to kind of combine both of those, or do you think they should stay separate as they've always been?
I mean, I think that any good marketer knows that you can't just over-index on one thing. The hard part, though, is understanding the balance there. In Web3, I made a lot of mistakes already. One being that to not necessarily ignore the community, but not think about like, oh, Discord, like those aren't growth channels. That's just like for customer support and, you know, getting people to stay happy. But in reality, the community now is actually a legit channel, just like you would plan for Facebook or search or anything like that. Like it is a channel that you cannot ignore, and it also is a big growth channel. We drive a lot of our campaigns to Discord first because our Discord community sells the idea. They're the ones that actually like almost convert players better than we could with any normal landing page. So I think that that's a really interesting thing. But I do think too, like not to over index on and you know, like it's not like I want to piss everyone off, but we were looking at like, hey, does keeping our community happy increase, you know, our sales, increase, you know, business impact? And it doesn't. Like there's no correlation to sentiment and business and, you know, sales. There's a correlation though to how many people talk about you. So if the more people that are talking about you, the more times you are talked about in general. We noticed, you know, spikes in sales and increased activity in marketplace and whatnot. So I think that's an interesting thing too, is okay, if the KPI then is not, let's keep everyone super happy, but it's, well, let's not like, you know, burn the house, but like, let's think about how do we get the most people talking about us, and how do we use that? How do we use the community as an effective growth channel? That's kind of been one of the big learnings so far in this Web3 world.
So when you're saying using it as a growth channel, would you say that in the customer cycle, you're pushing them to kind of become ambassadors for you as well?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point too, I think, of Web3 is that you're decentralizing your brand. So when when you have collectibles, you launch something and you're basically giving the rights to whoever owns it. You're now decentralizing the brand story, and that's now up to all of the people that are the 10,000 people that might have a collectible from you to either create from that and, you know, kind of continue with the lore or kind of spin-offs from that. And so I think that's an interesting thing too, is the ambassador and kind of decentralization of the storytelling.
Okay, absolutely. I agree. And I think it's important, like you said, to have the original lore, the seed that is planted is what's really important to engage the community, of course, and then focus on engaging them, as you said, to become ambassadors and keep telling the story and wherever it goes in the Web 3.0. Florian?
Yeah, I mean, as I mostly concern myself how I can get this decentralization happen in a fun, exciting way to actually distribute all this kind of stuff to people, so they can go and write their own stories with it, right? And I think for me the solution lies largely in finding ways to get this to people in the same way like you would in games. So we're talking drops, we're talking achievements, we're talking treasure hunts, we're talking challenges, we're talking all these kind of things that sort of already in the community space, but I think if you actually implement them in a system like a game that actually runs on itself, that you don't need to do the legwork to make all that happen. This is sort of what I think would be the coolest thing to do, and that's sort of what I'm trying to make happen at Wasder, finding ways to get brands in the hands of people while it's fun, so they can go and write their own story with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sophie, you've seen, through the years, the coming out with early games where there was no real community around them, right? There was users had to go to a forum somewhere and hope that there were some like-minded people there who also liked your game, or you found your little cliques in your city, etc. And going to what Jayne said about really cultivating the relationship with communities, cultivating relationship with brands and cultural happenings, etc. What do you think is the biggest opportunity with that, Ted?
Yeah, so here I bring my perspective more on my knowledge of what I've seen over the past years and games. I'm less familiar, of course, of what's happening these days with the whole Web3 craziness. But I think the principles still behind remain. These days, especially, it used to be a lot, actually, the past years, a lot around performance marketing where you buy your players. There's no other way. And it's just performance and like being the slave of CPI in a way, and that's how most games make it. But maybe in this spectrum and analogy, especially coming from hyper casual, yes, it's very competitive, and we go for the most marketable games. CPI dictates everything. But then you look on the other side of the spectrum, what we call more long lifetime games, casual games, and even like we see a lot of this World of Warcraft, like big, huge games, complex games. And it's not so much about performance marketing at this point, but it's about building communities, a loyalty, a relationship with players. And I think here this is what stays in the long term, where you can attract attention, and that's what hyper casual like get attention, and that's what you get when you go for really just buying attention. However, where people would invest their time, care about something, there's a relationship, and coming back to what Thomas was saying, like care about your players, know what they care about, why are they here, why would they hang out in that space. You need to go beyond, right? So you need a conversation, an interaction, and basically building something that people care about, where it's worth of their time, and not just their time and attention, but money in the long term. And that's what we see as well with the most successful games we've seen in the space, and that stay even 10 years after. We look at Candy Crush, for example, because it's kind of an evergreen game. There are huge communities around this game now, but it wasn't the case when it started. But that's how you keep a game staying for very, very long time. So I think the same principles we observe of what we see. I look at success that survives time, and I think we can take these lessons of how we can build the same principles in what we want to build in the long term for Metaverse and all these other cool new games.
Yeah, absolutely. And Thomas, I'm going to let you wrap up in about 30, 45 seconds here, but building Wasder specifically. So, I mean, we've talked about here about engaging communities. We've talked about how it's important to push them to become ambassadors, etc. How do you see this? Because building a community or a platform, a microverse, with thousands of games, but you have one specific audience. What do you think is the most important opportunity it brings for Wasder and for others?
I think it's actually a combination of, again, basically what Sophie, Jayne, and Florian says. I think, again, I have the luxury of being able to look at data, right? Because we're a social ecosystem, and we get to see what gamers talk about, and we get to see that interaction, not from a hey, we have to serve you an ad or hey, we're pitching you a game. We get to deliver a service and then see how users respond. So I think the combination, I think on the digital media side, I think a brand or a game have to create a base of the message they want to send, or that they would like the community to send in some sort of way. And I think that can be done through ads. I think that can be done through a great game. I think that could be done through probably a million different mechanics that I'm not smart enough to figure. And I love how Sophie, points out Candy Crush being one of the ones that has survived time. Luckily for me, the person who built our product, our chief product officer, was the lead producer of Candy Crush. And I couldn't admire a human being more than that. And so she's great. And I think Candy Crush was awesome that way. But I think then comes the thing that Jayne touches on, which is the community. How do you get the community to amplify? Because we've all been slaves to the CPI or the cost per click or the click-through rates and how anything you post, right? How do you get the community to amplify the brand that you have and the story you want to tell? Because I think those, especially in social media, and again, we are, to an extent, a portion of what we do is a social media inside of the social gaming microverse. How do you get them to amplify your message, your story, what you want them to achieve? Which brings me to the mechanic. And I think what Florian says is, to me, that's the answer. If you can find a brand that says, here's what I'd like you to do, here's what you get to do it, here's the mechanic that it makes it fun for you to do. It makes it fun for you and then rewarding for you to spread the message of the lore in a good way. I think that's the future. So for me, it's a combination of all three. It's a mix of the digital media buying, creating a cool brand, creating the mechanic that makes the community want to spread that message.
Yeah.
I think the challenges, which we haven't talked about, and we won't talk about in this topic, but I think could be a thought process to everyone, is if you hand that power to the community, how the hell do you protect the initial lore and the story of your brand? Because now you've handed it in the hands of something that can be very, very diverse in storytelling. I think that's exciting, and I think that's where why metaverses are great. But you do run the risk of a million players taking the story in a different direction than you initially intended. But to me, that's an opportunity. I think that's cool. Because I think that a million people are smarter than I am. So
a little scary for some, but a great opportunity for others. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah.
And with that, we're wrapping this topic. Thank you so much, everyone. Sophie, Florian, Thomas, Jayne, for this. Everyone else, stay tuned. We will be back in a couple of minutes. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wasder Fireside chat here about the future of gaming. We just concluded the topic about the biggest opportunities gaming companies have with brand engagement and digital media buying. And we're going to kind of continue in that route because the topic right now is how to get everyone today to know about your game and become a dedicated player. So providing solutions with discovery and conversions in a very, very saturated landscape. So with us, we went through the speakers last time as well, but Jayne from VP of Growth at Dapper Labs. We have Sophie, who's coming to us from Voodoo and Rise and Play. And then we have Thomas, CEO here at Wasder, and Florian, our Director of Systems Economy here at Wasder. So welcome everyone back to this amazingly exciting topic. So how to get everyone today to know about your game. So I want to continue the discussion in more on the discovery side of things than the acquisition or the brand engagement, etc. I think traditionally, it's been PR, it's been influencers, etc. What do you guys see as the main difference between, again, traditional discovery in gaming? I always think, as you notice through these topics, I think it's so important to tie the historical aspect of things in to understand the future, right? Someone much smarter than me said to understand the future, you must first understand history. So let's start with that, the historical aspect of discovery, right? And how do we see that progressing into the future? Jayne, you're up first.
All right, discoverability in a Web 2 like mobile games sense, it's the App Store or seeing an ad in a game that you're playing. Like you don't really it's a very different interest or way to discover a game than like right now in Web3. There's three top searches in Web3. What is an NFT or what is the metaverse? Where the second one is where to buy NFTs or where to basically either buy stock in a metaverse or and then the third or land. And then the third is where do I buy and sell NFTs or where do I buy and sell land? So kind of if you're following like the thought process of a user trying to understand this space or even a mobile game, the notion of like, well, what is this thing? And I think back when the App Store was launched, that was the question. Well, what, like they just were exploratory. Like, what is this App Store about? And now it's a lot more mature. So it's very specific about like people have very preferred types of gameplay. Like I know what kind of games I play and what I don't. And sometimes I think that can get lost too with pushing too much on like known IP. I'll get like an example is like Star Wars. Star Wars has typically pretty terrible, the game has pretty terrible discoverability in terms of people who are like, oh, that's Star Wars, I want to play it, but they're not a player and they're not qualified for the type of game that you have. It's just like an IP that basically over indexes on fandom. So I kind of see it as like, in the Web3 world, it's very much still what is an NFT, what is the metaverse? It's that level of discoverability. Whereas, in the Web2 or mobile game space, it's you have to balance the fanboyness of discoverability and the intention of wanting to play a game type or a game style that they're interested in.
Very interesting. I love that point of view with kind of the exploratory curiosity of people now moving into Web3 versus the more, I guess, passive approach from Web2 because it's so saturated. Really love that topic. I think we'll dig in more to that. Thomas, what's your take on?
Yeah, I think Jayne is spot on. Usually it was mobile ads, right? You'd see an ad, but I'm going to differ slightly because it was kind of the in mobile games. I would say social media. In a lot of cases, it was either brands you knew. So if you look at gamers, we would segment them into kind of, I would typically segment them kind of into three things. It's the genre and the style, the genre of the game that you like, the story setting type of, so sci-fi versus fiction versus shooters versus type of game. And I would then segment it into behavior. And then I would add discoverability on top. Typically discoverability here came through two things, either ads, three: ads, brand awareness, or your friends. I would say that the future is different. I think, but again, I'm biased because we're building a social ecosystem. But I think the future is twofold. I think it's the discoverability, and that's going to come through both ads, but also through people, more so than anything. What if you can build a solution where what people talk about becomes a funnel to lead the person from one place to another, to an area that is exclusive about that topic itself. So let's say, for example, that we're talking Jayne, we're talking, let's say Gala Games. We're talking about, for example, Townstar, or the Spider MOBA, which I think the Spider Tanks, which I think is just super cool because I'm a MOBA guy. So let's say that someone's talking about that. It leads everyone who sees that conversation into an area where they can find all of the information that the user would usually go Google to find. They would see, like, what kind of game is this? What kind of platforms is this on? What's this game about? What does this entail? Because it gets the answers to the previous things I said. The genre, the style of play, what it is, which is all of those things you have to answer from a consumer. And then, so you use that to lead the players where they have easy access to the information. But then it comes about brand awareness. How do you get that social funnel to lead them to a place where you, as a developer, as the creator, as the publisher, whatever it is, get to have a meaningful relationship and a stronger relationship with that audience? Because if you're talking digital media, it is so saturated on social media. You will see, look, Steam alone, like, okay, let's take our platform. We have 50, 60,000 games that people talk about literally in our platform. That's extremely saturated. Add ads on top of that, you have a problem. Now, if you can turn people into a funnel that leads you where you can create, as a developer, as a publisher, a connection with that audience, and that audience gets a value return in information, access to, they get to figure out all the stuff they need to figure out, and you can have a conversation and establish that relationship. To me, I think that's the answer. I think there are too many games now that the industry is growing where ads is not going to win. Like, because you're competing against bids. That's too costly. Like, it doesn't matter if you can create a great game anymore and just pay ads. Like, that's not going to win you the battle. You need to establish a relationship with that audience. To me, that means you need to turn people into a funnel where you can reach them.
Yep, absolutely. Sophie, what do you think?
Well, I think coming down to, again, discoverability with a saturated space, and we know this a little too much. I try to think of, like, especially past months or year, the games that went really viral, and again, there are always some things to learn from that, and why. So there was Among Us as well. I think, I don't know if all of you have played it, but it was really interesting, and it was actually there for a while. So there was a timing thing. And novelty aspect, like, it's fresh, it's perfect for now, and you connect with friends or people in a way that creates new experiences, and that is more powerful than anything you can play alone, right? So I think there's different components here of social interactions, the thing you talk about, and the timing where it feels fresh, novel now, although it might not be so fresh and new. And the latest game that also I talk a lot with our friends, if you know about it, Wordle. Probably it's like a game that it's like this word game where you have to guess the word per day. I don't know if you know about that one. Yes. And it's exchanging the strategy. Did you guess the word? And it's really interesting how it goes viral quickly, although it's nothing crazy. But again, it has the same components where it's perfect timing now, because it's not like word games is super popular, especially like for like a hot thing, but it comes back again, and it creates social interactions And that's what we we are looking for at the end of the day, right? So back to how a game experience can offer that, or create a system where you have these meaningful social interactions, and then you have it creates new experiences, the way you can play with more people that will do this with you, or just talk about what you've been doing in the game with others. I think it's what makes us feel alive, and very few games have managed to do that more accidentally than in a systematic way, but it's something to think of when you want to create worlds. I think also for MMORPG, like huge world, this is what is happening. It's meaningful interaction, and you get to talk about it, and it can go viral very quickly given how our world is connected these days. So I still believe this is the way, but very few manage to do this, where we see, especially in mobile games, where let's add a leaderboard or let's send lives. And this is a very artificial and shallow way to create connection. Of course, it doesn't work. At least understanding the social element and in a more societal and psychological way can help to create that virality around a game.
Can I cut in, Tommy?
Go for it.
Because I love what you say. So this is just, I'm going to phrase this halfway as a question. And I know that's technically her job, Tommy, sorry. But it's a little bit for both Sophie and Jayne and also Florian. But imagine, because you mentioned Wordon, and I think it's amazing. And I think, imagine if you, in a social media setting, you had an ecosystem where all the gamers are in one place, which obviously doesn't exist today. But you have someone who says, did you solve this? And every single person who sees that post can just click it, and it leads you to an environment where the developer of that, or the publisher, or everyone else can see that same conversation and engage in it. I mean, you guys have sat on the studio side, the development side. What kind of value would it add for you to be able to see a conversation on like that, just a human interaction from one person to another, turn into or place you in a context where you could talk to them? Because I think that's one of the things obviously we want to build, and I just want to hear the thought process of, can we turn that question that used to be between a friend and a friend, did you solve this, into a funnel that leads other people into an area where you can communicate with them? And would that even have value to you from in the positions in the past you guys have been in? Would you want to reach that audience?
Jayne?
I mean, yeah, I think it's got to be organic in terms of like the feel for that experience. I think to Sophie's point too, like you can't just slap leaderboards or social features on something that is not inherently social. But there's a lot of games that that can facilitate more organic social interaction, but it's not and I think that there's a lot of reasons, I guess, on the publisher side, we haven't focused on it. I think that sometimes we just consider it too hard, or like, well, if we add messaging, like when I was at Machine Zone, messaging was one of the biggest growth hacks, maybe if you want to say, that we ever rolled out. Like Gabe used to call it like adding chaos. Like when you create a game, you want to create some level of chaos. And messaging was the way to do it, because if you could anonymously message another guild and all of a sudden start chaos in that team, in that guild, and that was like a major way to just drive the economy within Machine Zone, within Game of War.
Yeah, Florian, I think you get to answer this.
Yeah, so what Sophie said in particular resonated with me, where she was saying like, oh yeah, to create this virality, to create these like big game experiences that everyone is playing, you need to have them in a social setting. And I think what we've been trying to do for games for years and years is to create these social settings within the games, right? And so when I came to Wasder, I was kind of like, hey, is there actually something we can do with the learnings we have from games of like how things, create chaos, how we can make this entertaining, but for a social network, which unlike say Facebook, which has everyone, we only have people who already love games. So we already have an environment where everyone who is in there has the right headspace to not be talking necessarily about their family, but, about games. And to kind of then take this and actually go like, hey, if we offer all these people already there, can we create this chaos by using game mechanics? So like things that we want to do is like have like a battle pass, but for a social network. So you actually engage with people as you being a good actor on this social network, you know, being a nice person, creating great posts and all that kind of stuff. You actually getting rewards. You actually playing an actual game. So there's not some kind of gamification thing where you just slapped on a leaderboard and a badge. It's like an experiment in actually trying out what happens if everyone in the social space with a shared interest gets to interact with each other socially around something that we feature there, which could be a brand or it could be ourselves. But so my great hope is here that we manage to capture this funnel in the sense that, you know, you come on a game-centric platform because something's featured on this month-long experience, Battle Pass experience, everyone gets to know about it. Because everyone does the things they do anyway, they get rewards on it. They can use these rewards like stickers and reactions, all that kind of stuff centering around this featured entity in the social network. Meaning they're constantly using it. There's a game of like who gets in, who doesn't, what you need to do and what you don't, to kind of create a shared experience that in the end of the season kind of explodes into, you know, what we also know from sports already, this kind of like grand finale where everyone's kind of partaking. So I'm trying to recreate the things that Jayne and Sophie mentioned, and I'm kind of curious what you guys' thoughts are on this. Yeah. I think I'm mad. I mean,
I think you're ambitious, but I think Florian, like of all people, I'm sure you can do it. I think it, you know, we're going to see some failures, like to iterate on it, but I think that, you know, it's an exciting like end state for sure.
I would like to revert back. I know we can continue this topic for a long time. I'd love to revert back a little bit to, I think, what you originally said, Jayne, with the going into Web3, right? Going into all these new technologies, because we are talking about the future of gaming. We've seen in the past, Web 2, Web 1, whatever, really, it's the kind of mentality of you know, build it and they will come. Right? Yeah. It always works in the beginning of a cycle because it's new, it's cool, it's exciting. You have the cool kids and the explorers finding something and they spread the word and it's cool. Now, it's not so cool releasing a mobile game on the App Store with 8 gazillion other mobile games, right? So you need other elements to get that exploration and variety, etc. that Sophie was talking about. Now, my question to you guys is, are we seeing a repeat of such a cycle with build it and they will come as we enter into these new technologies? And second of all, because you guys are all veterans, what have we learned so that we won't fall into some of the same traps that a lot of publishers fell into after they stepped in a little bit too late in the beginning of the former cycle, right? I've myself consulted with companies who spent millions of dollars on absolutely nothing because they came in too late, right? Mm-hmm. So how do we avoid those traps? And are we seeing a repeat of that cycle with Web3 now?
I mean, I think we always will repeat history to some degree. We can't get around that. But I think a few things that are great that we're taking from the Web2 kind of world in gaming is the aspect of fun. I mean, I think at the end of the day too, that Web3 games get bad rap for being not fun. Like, it looks like, you know, like it looks terrible. It's like super basic gameplay. But I think you have to look at it as like, this is the personification of what Web3 could be. And and if, you know, aesthetically, you might not like it, but maybe the mechanics of, wow, I can earn money, or this is a value exchange. Oh, when I buy, you know, a sword or I gain a sword, now I actually can trade it. I can sell it. Like this could be something that feels more of an actual shared value, an exchange value than before, where, you know, aggressive monetization in mobile games led to this bad rap too, that like we just over monetize our players and, you know, they're not loyal and all that. So I think that there's I'm hopeful for the Web3 space to continue to learn, just like mobile games learn from consoles. So
Yeah. Do you think there is a little risk here, though, in Web3 to over monetize? And we've seen some. We're going to talk about this in the last topic. But
yeah, let's save for the last one. Yeah.
Massive backlashes with NFTs, etc. So okay, awesome. Thomas, what do you think? The question is for anyone just tuning in: is of course, are we seeing a repeat of the cycle with new technologies like we did in Web 1 and 2? And what are the traps that we should be looking out for?
I think we can. I think the first one was obviously the big change was obviously paid games versus free to play games, right? That was the one of the big changes. And I think the underlying value proposition there was that you had a shift in core mechanics that gamers was used to, but it was fun. There was a value proposition to be told, and you had a story to tell about why this was good. I think there's a story to be told about why this is good for Web3. I think there's tons of good reasons, a million good reasons why this is good, and I could talk about them on for hours on end on everything from social values to equality to financial reasons to experience. But I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to for me is three things. And Jayne touched very highly on it with a key word, which is fun, which means the user experience, which Sophie has mentioned again on numerous occasions. I think one, you have to tell them, the audience have to understand, or you have to make the audience understand rather, or the players understand, what the hell am I trying to sell to give you? You have to make that fun and understandable and believable, and you have to provide a good experience in the process. If you do that, yes, we can see a shift. You can see a new generation adopting a new technology. If you can't get that across, no, I don't think we see a repeat of the cycle. I think that's where it stands and falls. Can you get the audience to buy into this, or can you not? Yeah, I think that would be I think we can see a new cycle in a good way. I actually think we can see a new cycle in a very positive way. I think the traps are very different. I think previously the traps were around, is there a value proposition? Can you create a value proposition? Here, I think there is a very huge value proposition, but I think there is an industry and a industry who doesn't want it. Number one, I think the industry you don't really want to tell the story about why, I want to give you control of the economy because it's going to hurt your revenue. So I don't think the industry really wants to tell the story. I think the other side of it is, if you can't explain it, then you're never going to get there. Previously, it was about, is there a value proposition? I think now there is, but I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot in the process by making a lot of dumb mistakes.
Right. Okay. And with that, I'm going to have to wrap. Sorry, Florian and Sophie, we have to wrap the topic right now. Thank you so much again, all the participants, for being on this very, very interesting topic. We'll be back in a few minutes with the next topic. Thank you. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Wasder Fireside Chat, where we're talking about the future of gaming. We've covered some really cool topics. 3 topics have been covered so far with some very, very competent and prominent speakers. We're moving into the 4th topic of the day, which is what does the future of social interaction in the digital gaming space look like? And of course, we have Thomas Gronnevik, the CEO of Wasder here on this panel. We have Nicolas Vereecke, who has spent the last 5 years building and investing in the crypto space. And he's currently part of the investment team over at BITKRAFT Ventures, where he focuses on the intersection of blockchain and games. He also hosts the Metacast, a podcast in which he discusses a wide range of gaming-related topics. And finally, in his free time, Nico enjoys collecting JPEGs on the internet. A true NFT lover, I'd say, right? And then Pablo Quiroga, of course, who is the co-founder and chief revenue officer of Star Atlas, which is the fastest growing next-gen gaming metaverse. It's fueled by a world-class global team. Star Atlas leverages Solana state-of-art Layer 1, Unreal Engine 5, Web3 Foundation, digital economy, and decentralized financial technology to enhance reality for audiences globally. And then with more than 2 decades of experience building high-growth business ecosystems, Pablo's mission at Star Atlas drives the company's global strategy and Web3 permissionless and censorship-resistant revenue model. And since officially launching Star Atlas January 14th last year, Pablo has exponentially expanded Star Atlas's external relationships with industry-leading platforms, IP portfolio estates, and it drives the growth of its corporate and business development, revenue models, marketing and comms, community growth, and among many other contributions. Welcome, everyone, to this panel.
Welcome. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty big question, the future of social interaction in the digital gaming space. And I think it's a really important one, obviously. We've talked about this today during this fireside chat about the past and Web 2 and Web 1 and how brands could find engagement and how players could find games, etc. But now we're talking about the actual social interaction in the digital gaming space. And it's important because, as we all know, Web3 is more so about communities and interaction than ever, at least in my opinion. I'll see if it differs from you guys. But let's talk about a little bit, because you're all experienced in this industry. And I think it's important, again, connecting some historical kind of facts to see the future. What did we traditionally do that has worked with social interaction in the digital gaming space? And where are we going entering a Web3 world? I think that's where I want to start. Pablo, you seem like you have some good thoughts on this.
Yeah, sure. Where do we start, right? I mean, there's just this tremendous ongoing, persistent transitioning into building out our digital parallel universe. And what that means to the way that we want to express ourselves and through our identity, right? And so, how people have been identifying themselves for a really long time. I'll put this chaleco on real quickly here. It's a Peruvian chaleco, and there's a lot of communities in Peru that they express themselves by what they wear, and their collective social interaction is impacted by, in some cases, the colors that they have on the clothes they wear signifies whether or not they're out looking for a partner or if they're married, right? And so it's really interesting how, in the past, things like self-expression and identity have worked for a really long time. We zoom, fast forward into what Mark Zuckerberg has done with Facebook. And, he found out early on that people love expressing themselves digitally. If you look at my LinkedIn profile picture, probably looks a lot better than what I look like right now, because that's there. People are looking at it all the time. And so, but it's funny, how sometimes we feel that like, we need to look better digitally than we do 24/7, and in IRL. But I think that there's so much more to explore as to the construct of collective social engagement and how that's being built in the gaming world. We know that in Sims, actually, there's been over, I think the stat is like 16 million hours, right? Or 16,000 years have been spent in Sims building and customizing your avatar. Like, that's insane, right? And that's just, I think it's about like 12% of time spent in game just customizing your avatar, right? So, well, people spend a lot of time doing that because they're going to go socialize, right, and engage there. So, yeah, I don't know. I think there's kind of like a foundational, sort of feedback to your question is like, I think identity is a big part of how social is going to continue evolving in gaming, and how you go from one game to another game, one platform to another platform, and so forth.
Right. Absolutely. And I would agree with that, at least. Let's see what Nico has to say, because as you said, I mean, expressing yourself, and as it becomes easier to create digital avatars to represent yourself, etc., I think that brings a lot of cool opportunities. Nico, what's your take on this?
I really liked what Pablo said, and I'd like to extend it beyond games. I feel one of the reasons I'm getting really excited about where we're going with the internet is what I've noticed when I was young was that I didn't have a lot of people around me where I was living, here in Belgium, that had the same interests as I did. And what I see today is that best friends I've actually never seen physically, because I have my little niche of things that I'm interested in, and the internet and technological advancements allow me to really find my tribe, find my people, find a bunch of nerds that are interested in the same stuff I'm interested in, and enjoy and spend time with them. And I think that's what gets me excited for what we're seeing in gaming, but also beyond, in the internet at large, and the social platforms that are being built.
Yeah. What do you think the future holds for finding that, finding your little cliques to hang out with, for example? Because I'm assuming in the past you found communities, of course, digitally, etc. But how do you see that being expressed in a kind of a Web3 world?
So, when you say the word Web3, the way I look at Web3 is Web3 puts a value layer on top of the internet. And it makes it really easy to transact value. And so what that brings to social, I think, is aligned incentives, where you and the people you identify most or best with can do things together and have the same incentives, and it allows for some very interesting things to happen. For example, you and your friends, you could together like build a stake in a team of people that are making a game, for example, and you can be a part of that creative process. You can as in your group, in your social group, give or bring your identity into a game that's being built. And there's many other applications of this Web3, and I it's hard for me to imagine everything that will be possible. But this one particular one I'm excited about.
Yep, absolutely. I think we're really going to dig into that later too, about the transfer of value and how that kind of engages communities and cultural behaviors as well, shifts paradigms, etc. It's a huge topic. But Thomas, let's hear your answer first here, or your thoughts.
I think the thing is that I really love what both Pablo and Nico says, and I think for me they connect so well. So for me, it starts with, I'm going to use a slightly different expression than The Sims, and like Pablo did. I'm going to use Skyrim, or a lot of these games or MMORPGs where you spend so much time creating your identity, and I think Pablo touches on it, which is that you have an identity in who you are as a human, And then you have your digital identity, and I think there are overlaps. I think the digital identity very often is a representation of your dreams and your thoughts and the stuff that you necessarily can't do in the real world. There's a huge overlap in it. But then you have the social aspect of it that Nico touches on, which is that you find historically in games, some games have created an ability for you to find your clique, your group, your peers, the people who share your common interests and who you resonate with. And I think the sad reality of the truth is, and especially during COVID, is that the world is colder, it's more disconnected than it used to be. I think social gaming can bridge that gap. I think we can bring what Nico was talking about to a bigger audience using gaming than we previously could without the labels, because of the shift in demography or in the way that the audience is. And then it comes back again. So for me, it starts with you get to create your digital identity and a representation of your identity in the digital world. And then you can use that to find your clique. And I think as a social network, obviously, that's what I want to facilitate. I want to help you find that audience that resonates with you, that shares your thoughts, your dreams, and what the kind of interest that you have. And then from that, you build a community, a guild that not only shares your interest, but it shares your goals. It shares your objectives. It's objective driven. You want the same things. You have the same vision, and you take that into the metaverses and the realities and the things that, for example, Star Atlas is creating. And I think this is why I love Pablo and what they do so incredibly much, is because once you've taken that, you've created your identity, you found people with similar identity, you've created a mechanic to union that into a group of people. Now you have a party on the other side who's developing something where they are willing to listen. So you can take that identity in your group. Now you can impact the world you're creating in such an incredible way. I mean, if me and my group could impact the world of Star Wars or the world of Harry Potter, you have the power of the people brought into now the people actually developing it. And for me, it's a circle. Each of these touch points are connected. And what I want to do with what we do is to create that overlap. I want to let them take that identity they created one place, represent it in a social environment to find the people in the group that Nico is after, and then help bring that group back to, for example, Star Atlas, so they can impact the world of Star Atlas. I think Web3 lays that foundation. I think that is the future of social interaction. I think it's no longer cut by borders of countries or religion or those things. It's value based, it's identity based, and it's based on vision, dreams, and you get to impact the world you're in, where you also represent your identity. And I God knows how many conversations I've had with Pablo on this, like in general, and it's for me, it's the ability to draw that inspiration, but letting huge social gaming is going to let the world impact everything that happens and find their peers and create social interaction. I'm super excited.
Yeah, man, you're hitting it right on the head. And you know what Nico was expressing and sharing was like, you know, hey, I've met these people that I've never seen in real life. I've communicated with them online. I became friends with them online. We're best friends online, right? And we're like a clan, we're a tribe. What's really interesting and what's happening right now, and the future in Web3, is that, you know, Nico's clan, right, can form a trust circle and almost like a North Star for what they're into, right? And they can open up a website, they can form a DAO, right, and says this DAO cares about these things, and it's online. And what's awesome about Web3 is other people who find out about that, you know, domain, and they like what the North Star means, and they find empathy there, they can join, and they can join without asking Nico. they can just join through purchasing, in some cases, a token, purchasing an NFT, right? And then it starts forming more, bigger, and Nico's tribe gets bigger, bigger, and bigger. And now Nico's tribe wants to go play X game or Y game or C social media platform, and they start creating value, right? And then that DAO, that time spent together, starts creating value, and you really start redefining value, recreating value, and what Nico was talking about with that value layer, all leveraging Web3 mechanics, which we just kind of talked about right now, which are kind of like on that spirit of decentralization and permissionless, and censorship resistant. So being able to take that tribe value and explore, a social platform that's Web3 based, or a game that's Web3 based, that's the future, right? Like that's where we're headed. The only thing is that the future is now, so it's fun.
Yeah, very true. And I think it's so interesting with the value added layer too, that we see a lot of emerging economies, for example, where this interaction really enables it not for the tribe not only to come together, but actually profit together, right? We see all these clans now enabling people to come out of poverty, for example, to build better lives for themselves, because that value layer has been added. And I'm kind of laughing a little bit here, because it's so fun that the group of people here is kind of like, you have Nico on the investor side who enables these worlds to be built, and Pablo, of course, building one of the fastest growing and most talked about metaverses out there in the space, and Thomas, of course, on Wasder, building the home and the base camp for the explorers and the gamers out there finding these new metaverses and gamifying their life. So it's an interesting conversation to have here. Pablo, for example, I want to ask you then, and this goes to you, Thomas, too, I guess. But so in building one of the fastest growing metaverses here, I'm assuming social interaction, is of course a huge pillar of what you're doing. What do you think is contributing to the success right now, and what are the things you are particularly looking at when it comes to social interaction in your metaverse?
I think that anyone who's involved with Web3 as an industry, as a movement, is experiencing success because they're not having to go through the loops and challenges and gatekeepers that you generally have to do to build things. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest holdups for building things is capital. And so if you can get direct access to capital by being very creative and actual creating value, you can do so by launching a PFP, project. I spoke to 2 young students from Princeton, dropped out of Princeton, second year of Princeton. They decided to go and raise capital by dropping a PFP project on the Solana ecosystem. They dropped a project. They were only expecting to raise like $1 million. They raised $5 million. And then their whole mission there was to create a guild. The guild was then informed and governed to pin 45% of their treasury towards buying in-game assets at Star Atlas, and then other assets in other games. Yep. So, I think it's like Web3 is frictionless. Right now, it's difficult for just anyone to really understand it, but you know what? It takes time, and if you do your research and you go online, all the information's online, right? So you got to really educate yourself on it, and then you're off to the races. For Star Atlas, I think that that was a big reason why we're kind of growing like mycelium right now, because we're just allowing for the community to create and to create their guilds, and for those guilds to form. And there's over 35 guilds right now in the Star Atlas ecosystem. And that I checked 2 weeks ago. Shame on me. I bet there's more now. And these guilds are creating more products, and they're creating their own marketplaces. They're creating, their own lore, right? Mm-hmm. All around our IP ecosystem. And it couldn't be more beautiful than what's happening right now at such an early stage and where we are in our journey. But social for us is like is also really important for those guilds to have other places where they can, express themselves and meet other people, right? And that's why it's very important for Web3 social platforms, like what Wasder is building, to exist, because those are the areas where it's like having your virtual parties or having your virtual lunches, having your meetings, right? And kind of exploring other realms. It's important for these smaller groups and then individuals too to attach themselves and discover other groups to be hanging out with, right? Back in the day, there was I don't know, Facebook. I haven't gone on Facebook a long time ago. It's been forever. I don't even know why it's still on my phone, but like they're all, where are the new Facebooks, right? Like those need to come out. Those need to bubble out because people are looking for those spaces to be in, and I think we're just all in a great phase of all of this, very early, to build.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Nico, as an investor, what are you looking at when it comes to social platforms or games or whatever it is, companies that you're investing in, when it comes to social interaction? What's important to you?
First of all, I just want to mention that, you know what they say, if you can't build, invest. So that's what I'm doing. And then I have Pablo and Thomas here, we're actually building stuff. I think it's a very, very good question, especially with what we've seen within the world of, play to earn or play and earn gaming over the past few months. I'm sometimes quite critical of a lot of games that, sell themselves as, come play the game and you're going to earn a lot of money while playing our game. It's super fun. Whenever I see a game, I always ask myself, okay, where's the value being created here? If people are taking money out of the game, where's the money actually coming from? Like, where's the value creation? And that's why I think that social is so important. I think that's the only sustainable games where players are actually going to be able to recapture some of the value that they bring in, are going to have a very, very strong social element. And that's why I look for games where, people will have to work together, and will, have asymmetric gameplays where, some people have certain roles, some other people have other roles. Where in a way we're going to be mimicking, the real world where, you have some people specializing in certain things, others specializing in other things. These are the types of, well, at least, when I talk to founders and people who are actually building this stuff, these are kind of the answers I'm usually looking for. I want them to be able to answer the question, what value is being created, that players will be able to take out.
Perfect. And Thomas, I know you have a great answer to this. I have to cut right now because we are out of time for this topic, but it actually segues nicely into the next topic, which is the creative collaboration between the social platform and the metaverses and games. So Thomas, hold your thought, and everyone else come back in a couple of minutes and we'll be right back. Thanks. All right, everyone. Hey, and welcome back to the Wasder Fireside chat here about the future of gaming. We've covered some really exciting topics with some fantastic speakers and panelists here, and I am really excited to get into the last two for this evening/morning, depending on where you are in the world, of course. Going to be talking about the creative collaboration between the social platforms and the metaverses in games. It's a huge topic, and with us we have Pablo from Star Atlas. We've already introduced, of course, Thomas, CEO of Wasder, Jayne from Dapper Labs, Nico from BITKRAFT, and we're also introducing Chris Price, who is a partnerships lead at Metaplex Studios, and he drives product use of the Metaplex protocol and helps build the ecosystem strategy through strategic partnerships with creators, developers, and leading consumer organizations. His past work was at Facebook and Meta, where he did similar work in the augmented reality space, along with building out the Spark AR community and managing the Spark AR partner network, growing it into the largest AR ecosystem out there. Welcome, everyone, to this topic on the Fireside Chat. This is a big one. It's about the creative collaboration between social platforms and the metaverses and games. Because somewhere along the chain, we've seen creative collaborations between different social platforms before and some games, but now that we're entering the world of Web3, metaverses, etc., let's take a quick, I think, what do you see have been working in the last kind of 5 years or so, and what do you think will have to shift in the next 5 years to really spark some more creative collaboration between the social platforms that exist and the new metaverses and the games that are coming out today? I think, Thomas, I'm going to let you speak first this time because we had to unfortunately cut you short last time.
Yeah, I think the thing is, for me, this actually comes down to human behavior. Right. I think if we look at the world 100 years ago, you knew your community. The way you discovered new things was through your community. It was the people around you. I think you formed your cliques there, and you went on to mutual interests. And I think, sadly, the world has gotten colder. I think in a lot of places that these connections exist less. I think they're moving to the digital space. I think we're ending up in a situation where gaming can facilitate these warm relationships, these warm exploratory explorations in a better way than they used to. So I think when it comes to games and metaverses in general, is you keep coming back to the big problem, which is that as a consumer, and I'm going to come at this purely from a consumer perspective, there might be this amazing metaverse and this amazing game that I could find, but how, right? I'm relying on Steam, for games, who's profit driven. I'm relying on Facebook, which again is very biased on certain things, on how they present things and what they give to me, rather than what would be best for me based on the people I know, the people I love, the people I care about, the things that I enjoy, my identity. So I think, obviously, since we're building a social gaming microverse, which is in reality a social ecosystem, my job is very simple, which is to help the consumers find the thing that will make them the happiest, where they can find the people they can connect with the most, which is the social aspect of it, and the interest that they have. So I think the jobs of social platforms is going to be to facilitate exploration and finding the right stuff and the right people. So mix of your interest and people, maybe depending on the microverse or metaverse in the game, maybe with some additional functionality around communication and facilitating the discussions and the relationships. But a lot of games build that themselves. So I think my job is to help you match you with your interest in a way that's good for you, and the right people. And it is about people and social connection, because it connects to your health, your mental health, and your well-being in general.
Yeah. Jayne, I'd like to kind of kick it over to you. I think as someone who is kind of enabler and catalyst and let me call you a renegade in the space, right? And moving moving into Web 3.0, how do you foster creative collaboration between, the social platforms of today and then the metaverses?
Yeah. How do I want to? Well, I see when I think about the metaverse and just like creator economies and things like that, I think about it in a few ways. There's the creator themselves that like back in the day, if Walt Disney were to still be alive and had NFTs, he would have launched probably 100 Mickey Mouses and sold them like, you can do whatever you want with these, go, create movies or build a Disneyland or whatever you want. But like, basically you monetizing his creativity in a way that we go back to like the decentralization of brand and decentralization of like I'm not a creative person, so I would have loved to buy some IP that like I'm like, well, as a business person I know how to monetize this or how to and so I think that Web3 is really interesting in giving that new vehicle, that new kind of like going from creator to a business person. And then I think every social platform now is thinking about their creator economy, less around monetizing through ads and more about how do we use the social influence to drive more revenue streams for our influencers. And I think it goes back to mental health too. A lot of influencers on social platforms, whether it be YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, have dealt with a lot of mental health issues because of that content treadmill. Like they have to post content, they have to post videos in order to make money. And that is an exhausting task and an exhausting career. And so now I think it feels like this could be more sustainable for creators or influencers where they could launch their own collectibles, or they could do they could tokenize themselves and like create memberships, and I think that it's I'm hopeful and excited that influencers and creators can be more supported through creator economies from social platforms.
Absolutely agree on that. And I mean, I've worked with some of the largest influencers in the world and seen them literally break down crying on the floor because they didn't get enough likes on posts, etc. So I think mental health is a very important topic that we're not going to cover today, but I did officially invite you to another fireside chat about it. So I'll
you
take
did.
up on
I will remember that. Yes.
Pablo, what's you have you're the one with the piece of art in the background, and you're also wearing a piece of art, if you kind of want to reiterate what it is to the people just tuning in, and how do you see this, for example, having, being the co-founder of one of the fastest growing metaverses in the world, how do you see the creative collaboration with the existing social networks out there?
Wow, yeah, I'm still thinking about the mental health piece. It's one that's dear to my heart, on having to work really closely and invested in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy platforms. But just to kind of just to nudge on this a little bit, Star Atlas is a space theme taking place 555 years into the future. And so in these spaceships that are so massive, one way that we're thinking of meeting people where they are is by creating recovery chambers inside of the ships, whereby people can enter into a light therapy room or engage with a breathwork exercise. And so the way that we can also extend that to already existing social media platforms or influencers is by allowing for them to own this NFT, this ship, and also allow them to create the businesses that they want to create inside of those ships. And so, for example, we've collaborated in the past with AudioUp. They are a podcast company creating movies for your ears. And one of their talent is called Major. Major, he's on a bunch of billboards right now in LA because he just launched a podcast around healing breathwork music. So it's called Frequency. So, I imagine someone like him, right? He's an artist, being able to create his own space inside of a ship and earn, revenue, right? Digital currency through the programming and experiences that he's, creating inside the ship. Now, how can he leverage his social media platform to bring people, and land inside the ship, that's going to be up to him and the people around him that are collaborating with him, right? So I think it's more just building spaces where people can actually find utility in the things that they're creating, right? So yeah, I mean, we're just excited at having this opportunity to have a lot of fun with this, with all these tools that we have. And just to kind of round out the thought, we've been working really closely with all the engineers over at Metaplex who love to eat glass for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And they're building awesome primitives that are really pushing the needle forward. And a lot of other projects, I think over 80,000 projects, I think is on the Metaplex ecosystem, that are actually allowing for influencers and social media companies or platforms or games like Star Atlas and Metaverses like Star Atlas to utilize, so think as an example, we had a case where we needed an NFT protocol to do X, Y, and Z. Well, our internal team could have spent months doing it, or we could have gone and utilized one of Metaplex's primitive protocols and just plug and chug, right? Get to market quicker. And that allowed us to bring forth the good experiences for our community and the influencers that are building around our ecosystem. So hats off to Metaplex as well.
Well, that kind of brings me over to you, Chris, coming, from Metaplex's kind of angle on this, and coming from Facebook, a major social network I think we've all heard about. How do you see the creative collaboration between such a huge thing and what you're doing, heading up strategic partnerships with creators over at Metaplex? How does that work for you?
Yeah, it's like at Metaplex, we're always talking with everybody in the space, whatever they're building and what they're trying to build, and trying to understand how can we extend the protocol to help support whatever their application is or the future of what they're trying to build. And so we're constantly getting pitched projects, hearing what people are building, understanding what the issues are today that exist in existing protocols or even our own protocol, and then taking that feedback back to products so they can actually extend it or build other protocols to kind of help support these initiatives. One of the things also about the social interaction about social media and metaverses is that a lot of this stuff has to be interoperable, right? And being that protocol that's a standard across NFTs and kind of making sure that we can support multiple experiences allows us to make sure that these social platforms and metaverses actually can talk to each other. Because it's not only I don't see the future, and a lot of people don't see the future as just being one metaverse, but probably multiple metaverses and multiple entry points into that metaverse. And so if you're going to take your NFTs or your digital objects that you own, or your personalities, or how you express yourself into these other environments, that digital ownership is actually kind of an important piece, right? And you want to be able to take it with you wherever you go and also express yourself, but also be able to bring your friends' content in as well and show them what you're doing and interact with them in a social context. So we very much are super interested in this space and listening to everybody, whether it's Star Atlas or other partners, and just kind of seeing what are they trying to build, how can we support it, and then how can we extend it for scale, being an open source platform. So that's kind of our take on it. And we're super excited about seeing what people are building, and it's always exciting to see how people are extending what we're building. And if we can get back to the community as a whole, that's a win for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sounds super exciting too. And I think obviously the digital ownership piece of things is also in the next and last topic that we have. So we'll save that for that, but it's a very, very important part of everything, I think. Nico, I'm going to pass the ball over to you. And from your standpoint, I think as an investor, but also as a kind of an expert and someone who's been in the industry for a long time, and focused very much on Web3, so to speak. We talked about adding, which is the internet with a value layer added on top of it. But how do you see, and what do you look for when it comes to creative collaborations with existing social media platforms and the projects, games, metaverses, companies that are being built?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. And one of the cool things about, being an investor is I don't have to build it. I can dream about it and then invest in people who are actually building it. Yeah. So when I see people like Chris, Pablo, and Thomas on here talking about, interoperability of assets, I get excited, right? that's, I guess, one of the big promises of Web3 games was always that I could take my sword, from one game, or my spaceship from one game, and then take it to the next, because I've put a lot of time in upgrading it and leveling it up. Obviously, everyone in games knows it's not that simple. And
Right.
I think that's where social media platforms who are trying to make the connection between different metaverses actually can play a significant role, right? Because from a point of a game developer, if you're building a virtual world, you're not really incentivized to look at this other virtual world that has built assets and then say, I'm going to let the people that are, having, let's say, a spaceship in that game, I'll let them take those spaceships, and I'm going to build a game around those spaceships as well. Because at that point, I can't sell my own spaceships. So I can, from that point, I think the incentives are not really, correctly in place for game builders to make something like that. And that's where I think social platforms could potentially solve that and allow for people to take their in-game assets, with them to another platform. And as we've had a whole discussion before this one about identity. I mean, I would have loved to be able to show off all my cool stuff in RuneScape when I was younger, but I couldn't. I couldn't show them off to my Facebook friends back then. So yeah,
Right.
that's one thing that's exciting me, and I hope we can see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel personally that creating interoperability is so important, and that people are much more open to it in a Web3 world instead of these old kind of corporate silos. It's either this or this, and there's no interoperability because it's owned by different corporations, etc. Whereas the new world is much more, decentralized, but also open to collaboration. I want to, Jayne, I want to kind of just shoot a quick question over to you. Mostly, I think that popped up in my head, and it's. Do you think that this new Web3 world and the more collaborative efforts, and you speak a lot about women in gaming and women in blockchain, and do you feel like this is something that's kind of helping pave the way for more female-led companies and female-led renegades, kind of such as yourself, coming up? Is this the world that we kind of all are looking for, or what do you feel about that?
I was talking to Nico, I think the other day about this, WAGME, we're all going to make it, but for me, it's women are going to make it. And the reason that I got into mobile games was because the console business was so male dominant, and it didn't feel like there was an opportunity, when I was starting my career, to actually have a career. And so so mobile games was the easy one because no one wanted to be in mobile games when I joined. And there weren't a lot of men. There were still, it was pretty split. And I feel like Web3 is the same way. There's a lot of women joining, a lot of female projects have gotten a lot of support and attention from the likes of Randy Zuckerberg, and even Gary Vee has been supporting a lot of female projects. And I think that I hope that continues. But I also hope we don't repeat history where it's a lot of women, and then it kind of repeat history and kind of suppress different, whether it's women or people that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, making sure that we don't suppress those over time and over optimize to the typical, I think the industries that we've all come from. So I think we need to embrace the different types of thinking and different types of projects, and also that all these projects too are valid. It doesn't need to be an open world game in a Web3 space in order to be a valid creator or designer or game developer. You can have a very simplistic expression of Web3, and that is still a valid project. And I think that we also need to embrace all aspects of creativity in the space.
Absolutely. And I think I at least feel it in my bones this time. I feel like what you're saying is super important, right? This is something that enables not only minorities, but women, female, led companies, etc., emerging economies. We've talked about that before in a way that's completely shifting a whole paradigm here, which I personally think is super cool. For creativity as well. I think, Thomas, I'm going to let you maybe round off the whole discussion because Well, kind of again, shameless plug here, but it's like what Wasder's building is really, we talked about entry points to different metaverses, and definitely the creativity that's happening in all these different metaverses, moving things between metaverses, etc. But in building a microverse, what's your view on the creative collaboration here between all of these parts?
I think for me, Pablo and Jayne kind of has throughout this talk touched on the two things that I actually think matters the most on this, and it's identity on one side, but it's storytelling on the other. And I don't think that word has been used the same way that I kind of think of it, but I'm hoping that I'm not misrepresenting either Pablo or Jayne here. But for me, it's what Web3 connected with social areas together with a gaming experience can do is that it can allow people of different identities to tell a story in a collaborative environment in a way that is fun and gamified. And what that does to people is that it allows people to have fun experiencing other people's views or perceptions. And I think the role of social media in many ways, we talked about value layers, or Nico especially talked about, value layers previously. What a lot of social media has done is that they've taken the stories and the content and the identity that you create of yourself, and they have taken kind of ownership and profit out of that. They've said, this is ours now, so we're going to profit out of it. What I want to do in a social media environment is I want to let anyone with an identity, and I think, as I said, and I told Jayne previously, my two favorite writers of all time is obviously Harry Potter and the Vampire Chronicles, which is two of the best storytellers of all time, and they both happen, and I say that intentionally, they both happen to be female. I think to me, it's about the story. It's the fact that you have two of the most amazing stories and thought process ever told that exists. Now, how can you bring that to the world? And what I want to do is I want to facilitate that journey from that into a gamified experience, into, for example, what Star Atlas and Pablo's creating, where this identity and this story can be expressed in a way that reaches everyone. And the reality of the truth is that in order for that to happen, you need to have technical capabilities to do so. I think that happens through items. I think that happens through technologies like Metaplex, through the taking ownership of those things and moving it into something that is created where this can be expressed, but that reality costs money. And then that's just the way it is. So for us to build something like that, where the views and the dreams of someone like Pablo or Jayne or anyone with a dream, you need people like Nico, right? You need the people who can help you facilitate. And Nico constantly says, he has said several times that he doesn't get to build. I disagree highly with that, because by facilitating someone like me and my team, or someone like Pablo and his team, or someone like Jayne and her team to build this world, you are the one providing the ability to do so. And I think we're all immensely grateful for anyone who helps us achieve those dreams. I think this idea that we do things on our own is crazy. The only way I can express my dreams is through the help of my team. The only way that my team can do so is through the help of people like Nico, and we need people like Pablo and Jayne to help us guide that vision. So I think Web3 allows us to be more connected than we have been in the past, which is why I'm so happy about it. So that's my rambling off, and it might sound like crazy rambling, but
no.
In my head, there's a thought process.
I'm going to wrap this topic up and keep all of you guys on here. Of course, we're going to take a little break here, but we're going into a huge topic, so stay tuned. I think this is going to be the topic that everybody kind of has been waiting on in the industry, at least, and that's removing the misconception that NFTs are bad. So let's talk about blockchain and NFTs and how they actually make gaming better. But stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Thank you, guys. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Wasder Fireside Chat. And we are moving into the last topic of the evening, which I think is they've all been super interesting, but this one, I think is going to fire a lot of good conversation. And I strongly want to urge any reporters that are tuning into this to really bring out your notepad and start taking some notes, because we got some of the most brilliant minds in blockchain, Web3, and gaming. And we are going to be talking about removing the misconception that NFTs are bad. So let's talk about how blockchain and NFTs actually make gaming better. And with us here today, of course, we have Chris Price from Metaplex Studios. We have Thomas Gronnevik, CEO of Wasder. We got Jayne from Dapper Labs, and we got Nico from BITKRAFT. So this is a huge topic. I've kind of been waiting on this, as a grand finale all evening. We've seen the media backlashes. We know that the media has now targeted blockchain and NFTs, and specifically in gaming, and how bad it is. Right? We've seen some failed attempts from some of the major game publishers and studios. I'm not sure I'm going to name anyone specifically to hang them out on a thread because we actually love their games. But we've seen some major backlashes from game devs, from other platforms, be them social or communicative platforms, etc., or game publishing platforms. And their launches and mention of NFTs have not gone the way I think they wanted at all. Why do you guys think it is that we're seeing this huge backlash, first of all, in media when it comes to gaming and NFTs? Chris, let's start with you.
Yeah, like this concept is one that's it's interesting because there's all different types of opinions on NFTs and gaming, and you get different perspectives from both the developers, the studios, as well as the players. But I think a lot of it comes down to a lot of how you see people approach NFTs and gaming today just isn't baked into the core game loop of the game or the strategy that's being kind of taken from the beginning. So I think there's a lot of issues around just understanding how NFTs are being implemented into the games, if they make sense in the context of the game and the core game loop of the game. And then also just mixed with the social negativities around either blockchain or what is being pushed by press and what you're hearing make the news, whether it's negativity or things that are just kind of wild, whether it's someone selling a digital good for multi-millions of dollars, doesn't really push the positives around the blockchain and gaming space that could be kind of benefited from the NFTs perspective. So I think a lot of that is kind of where the misconceptions come, and it's kind of where either you're a developer or a game studio, or if you're building something that is an NFT or blockchain component to a game aspect, that you actually take in consideration the core game loop. And if you can understand what your players or how NFTs and blockchain actually go into your game from the beginning, or if it's an addition, I think you'll get a lot better reception from both the players and developers and the community as a whole. And that's why it's kind of interesting when you see all these Web3 games that are popping up. They're going at it from a blockchain first perspective, understanding what their creators want, the people who are going to play the games, how it actually goes back into it. They're engaging the community of the players who are going to play it, and they can actually build out a robust developer ecosystem around their game, but also a player ecosystem as well. And you see a lot of these concepts play well in NFTs today, whether it's traditional decentralized apps, but you also, if you look at how game mechanics or purchasing in-game objects, a lot of that could be easily transported over to Web3 if you kind of understand how it can actually transition, but a lot of that comes down to education. So that's kind of where we see it. At Metaplex, we're building a protocol that's used by a lot of Web3 companies, and especially with NFTs, and we're trying to understand what gamers want and what developers want so that we can actually build out an interoperable protocol to actually support those use cases, first from the perspective of the player, but also developers who are building the games.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think there's a lot of negative focus on the social view on crypto and NFTs as opposed to talking about the opportunities and the technology, of course. Jayne, I want to hear your opinion on why do you think media has just kind of randomly started to generate this negative light on things, which has made gamers also kind of throw shade on the whole thing?
I mean, I've been getting thrown shade, ever since I entered the mobile game space. So there's no lack of shade, people not thinking it's a legit space. Yeah. Now in the Web3 space, I think it's the same thing. People get scared about what they don't know, or they, hear rumors. But I do think, to Chris's point, there has been a lot of disingenuous attempts at NFTs in monetization. Like, NFTs is not another microtransaction. And I think that that's a mistake that some larger companies, to not be named, have done, is they've launched it in a way that it might have been branded as NFTs and but it really was a price club, and it also was just microtransactions. So that's not value. That's not actually the premise of NFTs. And maybe even go back to Chris too. It's like interoperability, smart contracts. Like, don't worry first about the business side, about first think about what's the value to the player. There is a lot of money in it. I mean, you could get royalties in perpetuity on NFTs. Like, that is not something to ignore. But the way that a lot of Web2 games are built even today, when I was at a larger gaming company, I was pushing for an economy internally where we could be like, okay, this unit in the game is worth X amount in this other game. So we could even move, someone could move their points into a different game, or, figure out how much their item in this game was worth compared to this other game that was in our kind of ecosystem. And that alone was met with a lot of backlash internally, because of the way that game studios are set up too. They're studios. They're not a network of games yet. So if you have one studio that's making a lot of money, and you don't want them to, and you're in the same network, you don't want them to leave to go play on this other game where you're not making any money. And so there's this issue around you have to figure out how to motivate and incentivize internally your org structure. If you have a studio, central team, and then studios that are building games, otherwise it's always going to kind of be thrown as a microtransaction if you're not in, you haven't been building for Web3.
Right. I fully agree. Thomas, for everyone's information, of course, we've had many internal discussions about this topic, but I'd love for you to speak a little bit about your views on it.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little bit of more of a simplistic approach than both kind of Chris and Jayne does on this one. I think my personal opinion, and this is very much a personal opinion, but I really do think that this comes down to the consumers understanding what it is. I think they're terrified because they have when you start using buzzwords like crypto, NFT, MetaMask, DAO, DeFi, GameFi, you have an audience, especially new generations that are, 13 to 27. They have no idea what you're talking about. And if you're going to convince anyone that this is good for you, they have to understand what you're talking about. And I think I would start this if I were to do this, I would start this very simply, which is simply to say, look, blockchain is a technology choice. Just like the login service that you use to whatever it is that you log in over your platform, it is just a tech stack. It's not inherently good or bad. The biggest issue gamers have had, if we look at NFTs are God-given for gamers. And I say that as a gamer. If you do a Google search, you'll find 40 to 100 million results on why can't I trade my items on Steam? They have 1 billion lifetime accounts. The big issue is that they don't want you to. I play Dota. If I pick up a battle pass and Arcana, and I bought the Draw Arcana, it cost me about $300. I get 60 other items in the process. I don't care about any of those items. I cared about the Draw Arcana, which means that my friends who play the other characters, I'd like to give those items to, because I'm not going to need them. They mean nothing to me. But what publishers don't want to tell you is, if I bought 50 items and I start handing them out for free, now I'm directly hurting their revenue. What NFTs does is it allows me control of my stuff. I get to freely trade my things. I can give them to my friends. I can give them to my buddies. I can sell them. I get to dictate what I do with my own things. And even if you remove my account, guess what? I still have my own things. And that's one of the biggest, from a philosophy perspective, great things about it. The second part of this is the user experience part, right? And so first I solve the fact that now you can trade your things to your friends. You own your things, you can trade your things to your friends. They're yours, and I'm never going to mess with those. The other part of it is, what if I make a game so you can show off your FIFA cards on Facebook or Twitter or with us, or hell, you can even take that weapon in from one game into another game that has a similar type of philosophy where you can use it. Now you can create these mega worlds and mega experiences for you as a consumer that you couldn't do previously. Because what blockchain does is it transfers one thing. Now I'm simplifying a lot, but it safely transfers one piece of code from one place to another. What most games usually do is when you trade it from a friend to another, they delete it in one place and recreate it, which makes it very exploitable. You can do duping, you can be hacking, you can mess with the economy. What blockchain does is it's a tech choice that allows you to do what Unity and Unreal does for rendering game worlds. It does for moving stuff from one place to another. It's just a tech choice, and it's irrelevant to 99% of the consumers. What we need to tell them about is why it's good. But obviously Ubisoft and Steam and the mega publishers, they don't really want to say, so the great thing about this tech is that you own your stuff and you can freely trade it, because it directly hurts their revenue streams. That's not the story they want to tell, so they want to play on the buzzwords. And you can't convince the audience by playing on buzzwords. You can convince the audience on the upsides. You have to, so I come at it super, super, super simple. The audience we want doesn't know what the hell we're talking about. Let's explain to the audience why this is good for them. That's my immediate view. Obviously, Nico, I know, Nico, you've talked about this before because I've listened.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm definitely going to throw it over to Nico. I think I want to just inject. I think you're absolutely right. You can't create stuff and off of buzzwords. It becomes fake, right? You need to educate users, and we're going to talk about how we can remedy this situation, of course. But I think you're touching on many good things, such as, I think it's cool too to move items between games. I can see a long-term strategic benefit for collaboration. We were talking about collaboration before, right? Between platforms. That is a collaboration between platforms. Obviously, you can't take a mega plasma gun into a medieval game with no guns, right? There has to be restrictions. But I think I would love both game developers or publishers, if I could transfer an item over here and it's still my item and utilize it in both, awesome. To me, that's a dream come true for a gamer, right? But Nico, let's throw it over to you. Why do you think media has been painting this in such a negative light, first of all, and what do they have wrong about this? What is it they don't understand?
So first of all, I want to agree with Thomas what he said about, this is, blockchain is nothing more than a new type of technology, right? So blockchain is not inherently good or bad. And I think that's one of the issues that we see today. It's the fact that, because we've just injected a layer of value into the internet. The internet was always the Wild West in the beginning, at least. Everyone could put on everything they wanted on the internet, accessible for everyone. And so now we see the same thing, but there's a layer of value on top. So, people can, find ways to get the value that others have in their wallets. And that's what we see today. There's a lot of scams going on. There's, contracts being hacked. And so there's a lot of issues. And these are happening today. These will happen next year and in the years after. It's going to take a while for, things to settle down, for the Wild West to become civilized. And so I think this is one of the reasons why blockchain in general gets a bad rep. It's because it's being used by malicious people to scam others. And then I'm gonna disagree with what Thomas said at the end, where he says we have to tell people the great possibilities of blockchain. And because what I've noticed, and I've had this discussion quite a lot of time as well, quite a few times as well, is that the discussion I have is I tell them oh, look, this is possible with blockchain. And the response I get is, you have people just thinking about the game that they're playing. And then they're thinking, is blockchain that useful for the game that I'm playing? And it's usually not really the case. It's because, blockchain technology, I feel, is not the game changer that blockchain technology will bring is not going to be applied to the games we have today. we will need new games, like new types of games that are going to be fully making use of this technology. And I think those are going to be needed before we can convince the doubters. And I think, I mean, as much as I love the technology and I love what's possible, I think what we're going to need to do is to build something, to build a great game that really uses blockchain technology before we're going to be able to convince most of these doubters that are, you know, currently looking at what they're playing and saying blockchain doesn't change too much for me.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very interesting thought, that you need the new to kind of convince. And I think it moves into, obviously, my next question here that I think both Thomas and Nico kind of answered here, but is, you know, how do we remedy this? How do we talk to the consumers? How do we talk to the media about blockchain and NFT, specifically so approach in gaming from another angle? And how do we kind of make them realize that this is cool? And obviously the answer you gave, Nico, is important, that you need to build the new games, the new platforms that utilize this technology so that people can see for themselves, try it for themselves. But let's hear you, Chris, if you have any thoughts on this, on shifting the language and the narrative here.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll take it from the perspective of how we kind of did it at Facebook, right? Was when you have a new technology and people don't really understand it or don't understand the value of it, it's really beneficial to find a use case that which makes sense to them, right? And Nico kind of talked about this too. It's like, maybe it's going to be a new Web3 game, right? That comes out and has it within the core game loop of it. And it very much doesn't feel different or abnormal because it's baked into the core concept of every aspect of it, and it's a fun game to play, and players just engage in it and understand it. We did the same thing with augmented reality. Is like, when you think about what people are building today in the AR space, a lot of it's mobile AR, right? So it's done on your phone. But in the future of how Facebook is thinking about it, and some of these other companies, is that we most likely will be wearing wearable devices on our faces, right? But that concept of this new form factor and what may replace your mobile phone is kind of far out there, right? So what can you identify that you can do today on a mobile device that actually gets us closer to understanding the future of that technology in the future, right? So every phone has a camera on it. You can display contextualized information on a screen and overlay it on top of your real world environment. If you can identify that lighthouse experience, tell a case study around it, make it so that people understand it and show adoption of it, that helps break down that barrier of misunderstanding it. I think if you can do that with the Web3 space while allowing people to experiment and build out these use cases, I think that by the time that those lighthouse experiences are figured out or these games take off or experiment, most of these games will fail, some of them will succeed, but the ones that will succeed will also set the standards for what is a great Web3 game that leverages blockchain and NFTs in a way that makes sense for players and consumers as well as developers. And so I think that's how we can kind of shift that narrative.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. Love it. I love that answer. Jayne, I think I'd love to hear your kind of closing thoughts on how do we shift this narrative and how do we make people, media and gamers and players realize that this is actually something really cool and positive. I
think it's a mix of what Nico and Chris have said. It will be different games. We will need to build, just like the free-to-play model. Those are very different games than console and, those types of games. And so I think that there'll have to be different types of games where the core loop is native to either Web3 from a play-to-earn perspective or Web3 from a collectibles and trading and marketplaces. So that needs to be built in as well. The ability to transact, but not just transact, but be able to engage and exchange and, with other players. And I think the other thing is just, I cannot even today right now, like I can't sell a hardcore gamer that plays PC on Web3 games right now. Like it just is impossible because of the mentality that they have, and they haven't seen something that they want to play yet, and they don't understand like why, like they don't understand the value yet. Like and these are people that maybe have played 20 years of World of Warcraft on PC. And if they stop playing tomorrow, they get zero for it. They have zero invest, like they can't, you know, pull out the items that they've won. Their guild is not a DAO. So it's almost like trying to you have to have analogous thinking with gamers like that. But like, if you shone a light on like a gamer that had been playing a game for 20 years, and that 20 years from now in Web3, what that will look like is they could be, you know, gazillionaires. They could have so much money. They could have so much clout in the industry and in the gaming space. And I think that it's almost overwhelming to explain out of the gate. So, you know, I like to talk to my buddies that are, you know, more PC or whatever, like, hey, guilds, you know, like explain DAOs, and then, oh, you have all these items. Okay, well, there's marketplaces, and you can't just like throw everything at them at the same time. And that's at least how I'm thinking about approaching it. But it's not a us versus them. It's not like if you don't understand Web3 or you don't like it, you're closed-minded. It's just, it is what it is right now. And, you know, it will continue to evolve.
Yeah, no, I fully agree on that. And with that, I'd have to wrap the evening and wrap the topic. I really want to thank you guys for coming in here and speaking tonight. And I'll be doing a short summary right after this. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, quick summary here of the Wasder Fireside chat about the future of gaming. I want to thank the audience, of course, for coming in and watching our super interesting topics that we had or we talked about this evening. Big thank you to all the CEO of Wasder. We had Markus, our creative director here at Wasder, and Florian, of course, the director of systems and economy here at Wasder. And then we had Nico from BITKRAFT Ventures, Pablo from Star Atlas, Sophie from Voodoo and Rise and Play, Jayne from Dapper Labs, and Chris from Metaplex Studios. Big thank you for you guys to coming in and talking about all these really cool topics. And if you listen in from the beginning, you'll know that we talked about that gaming is the new cool, and we talked about attracting the new generation of gamers and what really makes them happy. And we also dug into the biggest opportunities gaming companies have with some brand engagement and digital media buying, where even myself, I learned a lot talking about the immersion of and the importance of bringing in culture, bringing in new thinking in this Web 3.0 kind of world. And then we went through how to get everybody today to know about your game and become a dedicated player. So we have solutions with discovery and conversions in a saturated landscape. We talked about the future of social interaction in the digital gaming space. And then finally, the last two topics, of course, was the creative collaboration between the social platforms and the metaverses in games. And then the last one that we just wrapped up was removing the misconception that NFTs are bad. And let's talk about how blockchain and NFTs actually make gaming better. If you have any follow-up questions, of course, you can always visit Wasder on Telegram. You can always also follow Wasder on twitter.com/WasderGG. I think we'll put all the links here at the end as well. And you can check out our website at wasder.gg. You're always welcome to contact us. You always download the app, of course. It's in the App Store. It's in the Google Play Store. Join in the conversations. Check out the game spaces. Check out the feeds. Check out all the cool stuff. We had so much fun. We're actually already preparing for a second fireside chat in the future. So stay tuned. There's some cool stuff coming up. Thank you so much once again for spending your evening here with us, and enjoy the rest of it. Thank you so much.